So to make a first feature film, you're going to need a script, right? You're going to need a story of some sort. I'm a writer director, and I highly recommend you try to go be a writer director yourself. Even if writing's not something you want to do long term, you're always going to have to be looking for a story if you're depending on someone else writing you a script. By writing and directing your own material, you can just put out more and more material on a regular basis. For me, I have a certain process. I learned script writing at an early age. I just bought a book on screenwriting and just read it and self-taught myself how to write a script. From there, I went out and got a copy of Final Draft, and started, writing my own scripts. I started with commercials and short films and little projects like that, things that were only 30 seconds long, 1 page long. And then later on made longer scripts, 5 minutes, 10 minutes long. And over time, started writing longer and longer films. It would be my suggestion to never make a short film over 10 minutes long. Most people want to watch a short film for that very reason. It's short. If you make something that's 40 minutes long, you're in this no man's land. It's not long enough to be a feature film or considered a feature. Most feature films have to be at least 70 minutes. But it's not long enough to be considered a feature, and it's too long to be a short, and it doesn't play well in festivals. That's just a little side note. So for my writing process, the first thing I do is I start with an outline. I do the circle diagram, and I utilize this to figure out what important things have to happen and at what point in the film. And I just write quick notes on that. Then when it comes to the script, I write 3 pages a day for 30 days. If you do this, you'll have a 90-page script in 1 month. It's really that simple. And usually 3 pages can be a scene, basically, something that takes place all at the house. And then they're going to leave the house. Well, that's where you stop. And the next scene takes place at a school, right? And you wrote 3 pages of what happened there at the school. And then that's probably transition somewhere else. So you just find that writing on an average 3 pages a day is a really good goal to shoot for if you want to write a script. Doesn't necessarily mean that script's going to be gold, but you'll at least have a good, strong, rough draft, and that you can work off of that rough draft from there. And when I say 3 pages a day, some days you'll write 4 or 5, and other days you might write 1 or 2, but for the most part, you'll average 3 pages a day. And I really try to always write at least 3. So I wouldn't even try to write just 1 or 2, at least 3. Sometimes you'll write a little bit more. Focus on that, and you'll have yourself a 90-page script. At 1 minute per page, that's a 90-minute movie. My feature film was 90 minutes originally out of a 90-page script. And I cut out a total of 20 minutes from the film, because when I did a screening, people had said there was certain parts that it dragged. And that was something I learned. I need to work on the tempo of my script that transitions into the feature film. There were scenes that I just didn't need that were slowing the film down, slowing the tempo of the film down. And I had to cut those scenes. It was hard to cut them out. And the worst part about it was I wasted a lot of time filming stuff that I never needed to film and writing stuff that I never needed to write. Had I taken more time with the script and thought those things through, I would have made things easier on myself during production. So strongly suggest aiming for a script that's only about 80 pages long. It's still considered a feature. Your budget will be less expensive to do that, and it's a perfect kind of size to aim for your first feature film. You may even trim a little bit more in that. You don't want to trim, your film less than 70 minutes though. 70 minutes is really like the cuff for it being considered a feature film for most film festivals and just most programs in general. Just a side note, I always type my scripts on an iPad. I find it to be a very convenient form of typing up scripts. iPad is very easy to carry around with you. It feels very natural to type your scripts on an iPad. So if you've never tried it before, I highly recommend it. When I started doing it on iPads, I was much happier than typing them up on a laptop personally. when making your first feature film, you have to consider the fact that you're probably not going to make your money back, especially if you make a film that's less than $10,000. Now, at the same time, because your budget is so low, if you're creative enough or if you win the right awards, you could easily make your money back. It's just that it's a tough gamble to get an investor to put in money on a film that's so low budget. So just something you want to think about. For me, my favorite way to fund a lot of my film projects is to apply for film grants. The money is free, you don't have to pay it back, and that's how I funded my feature film. I put up $5,000. I applied for a grant that would match $5,000, and so my total budget was $10,000 when I received that grant. I had applied for several other grants, and originally I wanted a budget between $25,000 and $50,000, but I just didn't receive the other grants that I had applied for. To keep the grant that I received, I had to move forward with the film, and I was at this crossroads of wondering if I could pull it off for only $10,000. And eventually I said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it, and I'm going to give it my best shot. And, a year later, I had my own feature film. So I was very happy about the fact that I was able to find a solution and a way to make the film by just cutting and trimming corners, which I'll get more into as we go along in this masterclass film series. Now, a lot of people do Kickstarter. I would not suggest doing Kickstarter. It's just never been my way of trying to fund a film. The idea that everyone's going to pitch in. Now, maybe you have a different community, but it just never seemed like a community that was going to... I don't have a community or support system that would really fund one of my feature film projects. It just seems very unlikely. I also feel like if it's your first feature film, maybe make that film and see what you're capable of. That way you can show people what you're capable of. And maybe it's a little bit better timing to then apply for a Kickstarter. Maybe on your second film, after you showcase, hey, look, I did this with only $10,000. If I can get so much X amount of money, I can maybe really do this, this, and this with my next film, something along those lines. So instead, with that first feature, try to do it yourself. Try not to go into debt to do it, because again, it's going to be very hard to pay off that debt with any sort of income you receive from that feature film. The nice part about a feature film that's for such a low budget is that you can play around with different distribution models. I'll talk more about that in a little bit later on in this series. And again, you don't want any investors involved with this first feature film. You're more than likely going to lose someone's money. It's not a good feeling to lose people's money. I never really lost anybody's money, but it's because I always knew that, investing in feature films is very risky, to say the least. And so I would try to avoid that. Maybe after you've done a feature film, you've gone through the whole process and done film festivals and distribution models and things of that nature, then you're in a much better place to really get an idea of what type of income you think you could receive for a feature film at a certain budget. So I would strongly suggest trying to avoid getting investors on that first feature film. A lot of times people that have various amounts of success with that first feature can make or break their career. And I'll get more into how so in a little bit. I've seen certain filmmakers that I know of that have gotten their first feature film into places like Sundance and Cannes, and that early success maybe hurt them more than it helped them. Their careers did not propel into bigger and bigger projects, maybe because of some of them had kind of developed egos, and those egos probably worked against them in the long run. So keep in mind that if you don't have early success, it might be for your benefit. It keeps you a little more grounded and it keeps you a little more humble. If you're a young guy and you get into Sundance with your first feature film, that might go to your head and it'll work against you. And I've seen it actually happen. So I don't actually want that for anybody, but I have seen those type of things happen. On the flip side, if you get an investor on your film and you've had some early success, that could also work against you. Now there's these money issues that are going to come up and people fighting over, who gets what and how much and everything else. You don't want to deal with all that. Instead, try to keep as much ownership with your project as much as possible. Even if you make your own independent film on a low budget and you have an opportunity to, get a low distribution model, but you have to sell off your rights, I would say just walk away from that deal. There's nothing super special about getting a distribution deal. There's companies out there that are making money off of you, and chances are you're not going to get anything in return. I've heard countless horror stories from independent filmmakers who have made their first feature, and then some distribution company basically, owns their rights and they got nothing for it. They said they would get a theatrical release, or, they would get some sort of, money on the back end. But in reality, they always find some sort of way to say, well, we spent so much in marketing and you have to pay those marketing costs up front, and so on and so forth. You're better off getting a bigger deal and then turning around and saying, hey, does anybody want to buy my very first feature? I still have it and I still own it. And you might actually be able to do something with that. So my suggestion, don't give up your rights to your film unless someone's just going to pay you outright what you spent on that film. Otherwise, walk away, keep your rights.